Hello. Honestly, thank you. Cool. So as Anna said, I'm Alex Jackson. I'm here today to talk to you about B2B paid social and how you can internationalize a strategy. Quick overview of what we're going to run through, obligatory intro and where I'm hyping myself up for a little bit. Run through why paid social in B2B. Move on to a little bit about sort of a paid social B2B strategy and some considerations, and then moving on to some wider international considerations. Then we'll just quickly touch on a summary to finish, and hopefully you'll find some things interesting in the talk today. Cool. So, me. That's me speaking in Barcelona a couple of months ago. Basically, I've worked across B2B, B2C, DR, international branding. I've worked across search, social, display, affiliates, pretty much all sort of paid media. As Anna said, I was part of the team who sort of won the European Paid Media Awards last year, best use of LinkedIn ads. We also were a finalist in the EU Search Awards for the best use of search and PPC in B2B. So hopefully it makes sense why I'm here speaking to you today about B2B paid social. And sadly, I also support Leeds United. The last time I had this, we hadn't been relegated. Now we've been relegated, so it's even sadder. But the less said about that, the better. Cool. So why paid social is essential to B2B organizations. I think typically paid social is or can be neglected in a lot of B2B instances. It doesn't necessarily mean it's not used, but I don't think it's used to its full capacity. It tends to be seen as a little bit of a fluffy channel. It's good for branding. It doesn't really drive sales or down funnel metrics. I'd like to maybe change that sort of preconception today a little bit. Maybe not all the way, but give you something to think about. First, I'm going to give a little bit of context on paid social in B2B, just covering a couple of the key channels. So the first is obviously LinkedIn. There are over 65 million companies on LinkedIn in over 200 countries. So, I mean, case in point, it's the perfect paid social channel to activate for a B2B strategy. The audience targeting, job title targeting, company industry targeting, seniority level targeting is perfect to find a niche audience that you can target at scale. The next, and rightly or wrongly, depending on your determination of the quality of leads that can come from Meta, it is exceptionally useful for B2B paid social. It has over 200 million businesses on the platform, and the chances are B2B customers are going to be on there given there's 3 billion daily users. Whether they're there on a working capacity or they're there just socially scrolling, your target audiences are going to be on the platform in some way. A little bit of a curveball, Quora, I never know if I say it right, but there's over 600 million monthly viewers on Quora, and there's over 1 million questions in the business category alone. So it's a really, really useful place to sort of build trust in a brand, to educate customers and answer questions that they may be are unsure of, and establish yourself as a sort of a knowledgeable company and build that level of trust. Finally, YouTube. Video is taking over sort of paid and organic marketing. With almost half of B2B tech buyers buying a product or service after they've watched a video, it makes sense to use in any B2B paid social strategy. And sort of marketers agree, it's the fourth most valued amongst all of the platforms now. But I think one of the reasons that paid social stands out as slightly more preferable in the B2B space is that traditional B2B channels are often reliant on things that either have a limited amount of data or they can be quite hard to attain. So let me explain in a little bit more detail, because that might seem really shrouded in mystery and confusing. When we look at traditional B2B activation channels, I think the three key ones that I'll sort of focus on here are search, display, and email. So let's take search as an example. If someone is searching something, there is, no matter how minuscule, a level of intent there. They may not know it, it may be sort of subconscious, but for them to have searched a term, there is some level of intent. With paid social, you're able to sort of passively build that level of intent to push people through to search. Display. Anyone that's used display here before in the past is likely no stranger to have seen display metrics from a supplier or from a platform that are reporting a huge amount of leads or a huge amount of conversions which exceed the past 3 years worth of leads and conversions that your website's seen, because it's so hard to measure. I also think display is typically more expensive and it costs a lot more to be able to do well than paid social at scale. But with paid social, you can be far more niche in your targeting and still achieve that sort of broader upper funnel scale branding. And finally, email. Email is a perfect channel for B2B. The problem is you have to have first party data to be able to activate email marketing. And there is no better way to build that first party data than using paid social and lead generation to then create a cheaper email campaign that you can push people through the funnel with. So, paid social, and what are a couple of its benefits? Obviously the fluffy bit, awareness. Paid social lets you build and cultivate your brand amongst a very broad target audience. I say broad, I'm going to be oxymoronic here, it's a broad niche. So realistically, the targeting capabilities in social are likely better than you can achieve with display. Display, you tend to overlay third-party audiences, but they're never sort of quite what you want. With LinkedIn, with Meta, you can focus on job titles, you can focus on company size, but you can still sort of build that broad net to get your brand in front of those users that you haven't done before. Lead generation. So as I said, lead generation is one of the best things you can use paid social for in B2B. I'll touch on a little bit more later how we do this, but I would argue that paid social is far better for lead generation and softer lead generation than search, than display, and arguably email, ultimately because you already need those leads in before you can push them through email marketing. Nurturing. I think this is an often overlooked aspect of B2B in general. So nurturing is where you're sort of staying front of mind with your potential customers. So people who've already hit the sales pipeline or who are already sort of partially down the funnel and you've kind of forgotten about them from a paid media activation point. This is where you can essentially not try and improve your branding with them, not try and push them for a sale, but you're making them aware that you're the right company. You just stay in front of mind, you're showing them case studies, you're showing them that you're the right partner so that the sales teams can continue having those conversations and there's always a point of reference throughout that process. ABM, obviously account-based marketing. It's perfect for paid social and a lot of successful ABM strategies will integrate social. I guess the problem is that I think sometimes companies assume that you can use ABM across the full journey through social. And realistically, the best the best steps to activate social are your one-to-many approach, where you can go relatively broad with the accounts you need to target, and then the accounts that you have targeted and that have started to engage, that's where you can push them a little bit further down the funnel and start to have some more personalized conversations using things like conversation ads on LinkedIn, for example, where you're speaking directly to users. And then that's where you can bring the sales team on for those one-to-one conversations. So it's not about using paid social for everything, it's about using it for the right parts of ABM. But do you really need paid social to do any of those things, I guess is the question. Before I answer it, I'm going to show you this chaotic mess, which is the Gartner's B2B sales process. I don't even think it can be described as a funnel because it's just mayhem. I guess getting from the start to purchase decision, what we're trying to highlight is that absolutely anything can go wrong at any stage of the funnel because there tends to be so many more stakeholders in B2B than just trying to sell someone a pair of shoes. There's finance, there's tech issues, there's compliance, there's multiple teams needing to be on board, and at any point, anything can can throw it off, which is why it's so chaotic. But with paid social, we're not trying to get people to go straight from the start to the purchase decision. That's not the point of using paid social in B2B. The real point is reducing the gap. It's not about driving people from A to B. It's about driving from people from A to B to H to Z to Y, back to C, all the way to yellow. Because realistically, it's going to be messy. If we can slightly reduce the mess, then it's working. So I think, no, you don't need paid social, but by not including paid social in a B2B marketing strategy, you're making it a lot harder on yourselves, and you're ultimately making that process from start to the decision making much more complex than it needs to be. Social strategy. So what I want to jump into now is a few sort of things that I think when you're putting a B2B social strategy together, you need to have front of mind and you always need to sort of refer back to. First, just like a book, don't start at the middle and don't start at the end. You have to be aware that if a customer is jumping in at the middle or jumping in at the end, you're probably burning through your budget unnecessarily. You need to warm people up. Yes, there will be cold prospects that will convert. It will happen, but realistically, the amount of them are going to be, they probably would have converted anyway, whether you were using social or not. So if you jump straight in and ask for a soft lead, or if you jump right to the end and ask people to book a demo, the likelihood is it's not going to work, or they've probably already had some touch points with you, you just didn't realize it. So when you're sort of building this strategy, start at the top, build those connections, build the awareness, get in front of the right people, and try and pull them through the funnel. Because otherwise, as I said, you're burning your budget, your click-through rates are going to be awful, and your conversion rates are going to be even worse. B2B isn't the corporate, unemotional world you think it is. And there's a sad egg there, and I don't know why there's a sad egg, but yeah, B2B isn't the corporate and unemotional world. So I think everyone thinks B2B and immediately sees, oh, suit, shirt, tie, very professional tone of voice, nothing else. Realistically, you're still talking to a human on the other side of the screen. There's no reason you can't build emotional connections and sort of root your marketing in building a one-to-one relationship. You'd do it with ABM, you'd probably do it on other channels, you'd do it in other industries. There's no reason you can't for B2B. There are always going to be some verticals where it's slightly different. And obviously if your brand tone of voice is very corporate, don't suddenly start talking in a ridiculously stand-up comedian way, but try and realize that you can sort of build that connection with someone. And the sooner you start with the awareness, sort of your branding side of things, the easier it's going to be to push people through to that decision-making stage. Gated content, as I've already said, is the champion of B2B lead gen. So this blurry box on the left-hand side runs through LinkedIn's sort of 4 key engagement metrics for content. So we've got engaging and uncommon, common and engaging, uncommon and not engaging, and common and less engaging. The sweet spot, obviously, is engaging and uncommon, because that's a gap in the market. It means people are going to be interested in those topics, and it means that your competitors aren't delivering it to people. So by filling that gap in the market, it's going to be really easy for you to drive lead generation. Obviously, there are reasons why you would potentially look at the common and engaging. There's a lot of it out there, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's not effective. And the common and less engaging doesn't necessarily mean it's bad and people will still engage. I would obviously avoid uncommon and not engaging because no one's going to look at it and there's none there for a reason. But if you can sort of find a gap in the market, it's going to be really easy for you to build that first party data to pull through into your email campaigns and to sort of build into your remarketing lists. Don't forget about your customer's most valuable resource. We're not buying ad space, we're buying time. That's realistically what we're doing. We're trying to serve ads to people in their spare time or in their working capacity. And whilst we might sometimes see it as a click or an impression, to them, they're spending their valuable resources looking at that and engaging with your content. So make sure that you're giving them the right resources and giving them the information so that it's worthwhile, because otherwise they're going to have a negative perception of your brand. Paid media, you've probably heard, sort of use a wide net, catch a lot of fish. It works, but it also means you're catching the wrong fish. So what you need to remember is that one size doesn't ever fit all in B2B. You need to tailor your messaging. You need to make sure you know who you're speaking to. You need to determine if you need to change your messaging and who you're speaking to based on the product that you're trying to sell, if you've got different products. And you also need to determine their intent level. What I'm not saying is have 7,000 different campaigns all running, spending a penny a day because you've gone so segmented and tried to be ridiculously granular with all of this. What I am saying is make sure that everything is unique and you're tailoring the right copy to the right people, i.e. using prospecting and retargeting copy and creatives that are the same. It's probably going to drop your conversion rates and your click-through rates. And finally on this point, just understand who your competitors are. Just because someone isn't a assumed competitor, if they're fighting for the same ad space and the company you're trying to fight for only has marketing budget for one piece of software, they're still your competitor because they're in the same space. It's actually easier than ever to look at your competitors' ads on Facebook and LinkedIn. Both have an ad library so you can see everything that's currently live. Go look at what they're doing well, look at what they're not doing, and sort of fill the gaps. Cool. I'm going to jump into some international considerations now. Realistically, everybody wants to just copy and paste what they do in one market into another market. If you do that, yes, there are some structural things that might be similar, some messaging might be similar, but it's never going to be as effective as if you actually do your research. Every international market and every region expansion needs in-depth research, whether that's from your paid media team, whether that's from your strategic teams, or every team that's involved. You need to understand what market you're jumping into and why. Prime example, Starbucks. Everybody knows who Starbucks are. They're a sort of huge brand. Went into Australia with no market research, lost over $100 million in the first sort of 6 to 12 months because they didn't understand the market. Australians absolutely love coffee. They hated Starbucks coffee. Now Starbucks is still in Australia, but they only serve to tourists because domestic users hate them. They didn't fail, but they had the money to sort of convert and switch their strategy. Not everybody has that. Not everybody has Starbucks money. So it's really important to know what you're doing and why. If your user journey is messy or unclear, you're going to massively damage your campaign's potential and potentially your brand. If you're serving ads in one language and directing them to a landing page in a different language, and then your sales process is in that same language, then realistically, you're going to get loads of people that are taking that first step, hitting your site potentially, but then there's such a complete disparity that it's not worth the media spend that you've invested, and you're better off using that to internationalize your site, sorry. It's not quick, it's not easy, and it's not cheap. If it was, every single brand would be global. So what it's really important to do is sort of start small. If you're a domestic brand at the moment and you're saying, I want to launch in every single European country in the next 12 months, I would probably say, take a step back. Is that realistic? Do you need to start smaller? Do you need to start smaller in a specific country, expand in one country, and then replicate in a similar market and keep going? Not every market is going to work for you. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It just means it's why you need to do the research. It's why you need to have everything tailored. It's why you need to have a really clear user journey from sort of the original ad all the way through, including your search ads, your email. Everything needs to marry up so that it's a really clear process from start to finish. Social is rich media. It's sort of the beauty of it is your creatives, your copy, and your tone of voice are sort of ever present. So make sure that if you're using specific tones of voice, they're market relevant. Prime example, if you're in Spanish region, for example, there may be different dialects and different uses of language that would put people off from clicking through in different regions. Traditional web networks might not have the same reach as region-specific platforms. One prime example of this is LinkedIn. In the DACH regions, LinkedIn and Xing, who are both job site platforms, have the exact same market share of 14%. Most people that launch in the DACH regions or Germany wouldn't even think to include Xing unless they were native from the DACH regions. So again, make sure you're doing your research to understand if there are any other platforms that you can include in your strategy to test. Speaking of testing, never underestimate the power of it. Go back to high school science, have a hypothesis, build data, act on that data. If a test doesn't work, it doesn't mean it's a bad thing, as long as you tried to sort of assume what would happen. If it doesn't happen, try and figure out why, roll out another test. Despite everything I've said, harping on about B2B paid social, don't rely solely on it. It needs to be used as part of a wider strategy, because if you're only looking at paid social, it's not going to be easier to reduce the first step to the last step. It's going to be even harder. Everything has to work together as a mix. So just to summarize, paid social can be a really impressive tool for B2B. Make sure you're building data, drive awareness, push for sales, push for lead generation, do your research on competitors, new markets, your audiences and who you're talking to, and take the time to tailor what you're doing, whether that's your creatives, your languages, your landing pages, your other content. And as I said, don't rely on paid media. Thank you for listening. I'm Alex Jackson, and that's been B2B Paid Social. Cheers.